Hello everyone. Um, it's nice to see you again. So I posted this data on a group chat earlier on and asked you guys to help me clean it up and make some sense out of it. But obviously, we all seem to have been too busy to do that. So I'm going to guide us this morning how to achieve that. Now, this data before us is the data that was gotten from a questionnaire that was administered to sweet potato farmers in Karu local government of Nasarawa State. And the objective was to find out their recording habits. Do they record any of their farm activities? Is it their harvest, their sales, pest and disease management? Do they keep any sort of records in the farm? And if they do, what device do they use? Do they use any digital device, or they use paperback notebooks, or they commit to memory? So we want to find out which of these options they actually use. And then before we dive into this data to analyze or make sense out of it, we need to understand our objectives very well. Like what kind of response, what interpretations do I need from this data? That will help me focus my analysis to the area, because there are so many columns here that I do not need. But if I'm able to understand my objective and write it down, I'll be able to have a focus on the areas to concentrate on and do a proper analysis. So the first thing I need to do first is make sense of this data. And how do we do that? We need to adjust the columns and rows so that everything becomes very, very visible. Let's continue. Now, like I said earlier, I have looked at my data, I have written down my objectives, what kind of insights I need to glimpse from the data. That will help me or guide me in the analysis I'm about to do now. So the first thing we need to do is make this data visually appealing. If you can see, some of the columns are, some of the letters are tucked in, so we need to expand the columns to make sure we are able to view all the data. Now, go to the top corner. If you're seeing my cursor, I'm on column A. Now, immediately behind column A, there's an angle pointing downwards. That helps me select all the data in this worksheet. So I'll just click there, and then I'll come in between column A and B. There's a thin line there. Put your cursor there and get this cursor head. Then click twice on it. That is, double click on it. Good. Now you can see that automatically my data has been arranged and is now looking quite nice. Now there's something I did. I looked at my objectives. All right, I looked at the objectives of this work. I'm going to show you the objectives. These are my objectives. Okay, I looked at these objectives and I decided on the columns that I needed to keep and the columns I needed to take out of that worksheet. Are we following? I've written down my objectives, what kind of insight I need to glimpse from this work, and I've taken out the data that I do not need. That is the data that is not really necessary for my work. It might be necessary for some socioeconomic work, but not for mine. So I was able to take them out of my work, and now I'm left with my unique data that is going to allow me achieve my objective. Okay, so let's proceed. Now that we've been able to make the data visually appealing, at least it's nice to look at now. The next thing we need to do is to format our headings. And how do we do that? You just bold them so you can differentiate them from the rest of the data. So I highlight to the end and I'll just click on bold. Good. I've sorted that out. Now the next thing is to turn this data into a table, tabulate it. Okay? So how do I do that? I highlight the entire data to the very end, then I go to insert, right? And I click table. Okay? Excel is asking me what's the range, A1 to Q17, agreed. So I click OK, and my data has been tabulated. Oops, I missed something here. So I'll just Control Zap that. That is Control Z. Go back. Ensure you capture the entire data. Go to insert, click on the table and click OK. Now you can see that the entire data has been tabulated. Now you also need to check for missing data and inconsistent data while going through this. So you can actually correct them, recode them as you wish, depending on the objective of your own work or whatever it is you're doing. You need to go through the data, look for inconsistent or missing data, and fill them or recode them as you choose. Now that we've done this, the next thing we need to do is move this data into a pivot table. We need to move the data into a pivot table. That will help us do the analysis proper. So the next thing we'll do is move our data into a pivot table to help us carry out the analysis. So I'm going to highlight the entirety of my data down to the very end, and then I'm going to go to the Insert tab over here, and then I'm going to click on the pivot table. That's the first icon under the Insert tab. As soon as I click on the Insert tab, Excel wants to know if I am moving my worksheet. If I'm moving my work into a worksheet, I'm going to go ahead and agree to that, and then I have my work in a new worksheet. All right, with my headings to the right. The headings in the work are all lined up to the right. So the first thing I want to do is I want to check for the record keeping rate by age group. And how do I achieve that? I achieve that by picking the age and dragging it down to the row labels down here. I'll keep it there. Then I'm going to go to the column that says, do you keep record of your sweet potato farming activities? The response there is usually yes or no. So I'm going to drag that column down to the column row down here, column label down here, drop it there, and I'm going to drag that same column again down to the value count and drop it there. Then the next thing I want to do, I want to format these numbers as a percentage of the total. So how do I do that? I'll go ahead and click here, go to value field settings, go to show value as, and set it as percentage of the total and click OK. Now I am looking at a percentage of the total. I have the age bracket and their various responses, whether they keep records or not. You can see over here, so the highest is 31 to 40. That's the age bracket that does a lot of record keeping in the work. So I've done that for now. I'm going to go ahead and check some other. Next thing we want to look at is the average yield by record keeping status. So with my data still highlighted, I'm going to insert another pivot table. So same process again. I'll go to insert, click on the pivot table and agree to this. Okay, I have a brand new pivot table. So how do I intend to achieve my aim now, which is to check for the average yield by their record keeping status? I'm going to look for the record keeping status. Then I'm going to drag it down to the row labels and drop it there. You can see over here it's either a yes or no. Then I'm going to drag the average annual yield or average annual yield over here. I'm going to drag this one down to the values down here, drop it there. Then I'm going to click here as I did before, go to value settings, and then I'm going to check this as average. It's showing some. I'm going to check it as average and click OK. Now I can see the average yield by record keeping status. For those that do not keep records, they have 200 kg by average annually, and for those that do keep records, they have 1,498.75. So the data tells the story. So one other thing we want to do is we want to create a chart. Let's see if we can create a simple bar chart for this information here. This is the count of record keeping, count of do you keep records in your sweet potato farming activities, and how do we intend to achieve that? We are going to click on pivot table over here, and then simply go to a bar chart, click OK, and we'll have a brand new chart here showing the record keeping status and their age